Walt hit us up from Pacific Palisades, California. Prayers up for you out there, Walt. We were just out there. The areas that you've seen on the news in Southern California, we were literally just there. Pacific Palisades being one of them. Walt said, would you consider the golden age of college football to be in the past or on the horizon? This is an example of a wonderful question. So, I'm asking you, think about Walt's question. The golden age, you could use any criteria you want. The golden age of college football, is it back in the black and white TV days? Is it in the 80s? Is it the BCS era? Is it today? Or, and there are many who hold the opinion of what I'm about to say, maybe the golden age is yet to come. Selfishly, I hope you're right about that. I'll tell you what my golden age of college football was. I'm gonna pick a 12-year period. You can do whatever you want to, though. The BCS era was my golden age of college football. I'm going to give you 1998 to 2010, and I'm going to give you my reasons why. Now, I romanticized that era because I was kind of a kid. I was coming of age. I was becoming a young adult in this era. So, I mean, this is middle school. This is high school for me. This is college for me. Yeah, I know. I'll grant you that a lot of people look back on that formative part of their life and maybe they romanticize things to be greater than they were. I really don't think I'm doing that here, and I'm going to give you the reasons. Think about this. Out of that 13-year period, there were 11 unique champions in that 13-year period. So 98 to 2010, 11 different champions in a 13-year stretch. Tennessee, Florida State, Oklahoma, Miami, Ohio State, LSU, Southern Cal, Texas, Florida, LSU, Florida, Bama, Auburn. The SEC on the back half of that part started their run. But before that, you didn't have the SEC chokehold on the sport quite yet. You also had Keith Jackson on the call. You had Brent Musburger on the call. You were at the latter portions of, to me, the golden age of college football broadcasting. One thing that's very important to me is it was pre-smartphone, which sounds like a bad thing, but it's a great thing from a crowd dynamics standpoint. Go look at some of these championship games. Go look at the 05 game. The 05 game, the Texas USC game, is significant because it may be one of the best college football games ever played, and it's just a vintage moment in sporting lore, but also it's pre-smartphone, which means when you look at the highlights, everyone's eyes are on the action, and you see the flashbolts. It's the flashbolt era. It's people holding up literal cameras and taking a picture, and boy, the picture quality was great from Section 308 that night in the Rose Bowl. I am a believer that the smartphone is one of the greatest inventions in human history, but there have been some downsides, and one of the downsides is there was a vibe pre-smartphone at sporting events and concerts that you could never get back. You can never get it back. And this era was the last era before that. Studio programming hit its pinnacle in this era. And the worst part is, I don't think we realized it. I do not think we fully appreciated what Mark May and Lou Holtz with Reese Davis in a judge's robe Saturday night at 1:30 in the morning truly meant. It was wonderful television, and it couldn't be duplicated, and no consultant group would ever approve that, but it was wonderful. I can understand every third word out of Lou Holtz's mouth. Mark May's eyes have rolled in the back of his head like The Undertaker. It's great. It was wonderful TV, and only after it was gone did I fully appreciate it. Also, the college football video game came of age. Like, that thing was around in the 90s. The early to mid-90s, Jesse, was when they first made it. But look at the advances in the video game. That's when I started to play it, was in the early, mid-2000s. Bowl season was still fully pristine. No one opted out. Some of the best moments of college football postseason in this era are not from BCS games, championship games. They're from non-championship games. It's pre-playoff. I mean, the Fiesta Bowl between Boise State and Oklahoma is just that. It's a BCS game. It's one of the most memorable moments in college football history. Remember the Clowney hit in the Capital One Bowl against Michigan? It's just a New Year's Day game. And by the way, Jadeveon Clowney opting in to play the game. And if you ask him, why are you opting in that era, he would have said, well, what else would I do? It's a football game. We're playing. Oh, it was so great. Also, this is an entirely separate thing. Think about the nature of recruiting in the mid-2000s. This is when Rivals really comes of age. This is when the star ranking system really blows up. This is when recruiting, to me, hits its apex. Now, I don't know what the web traffic numbers are, and the web traffic numbers probably continue to go up and go up, but the spirit and flavor and vibe of recruiting back then was awesome. National Signing Day was a holiday. As far as I was concerned, I mean, I'm not kidding you when I say this now, my year as a college football fan revolved around the season, but there was no day that was more important to me outside of the Saturday of week 1 than National Signing Day. It was more important than the national championship game itself in terms of a day on the calendar. More important than Christmas, more important than any holiday. The first Wednesday in February, I had to have a game plan. I had to either be out of school or I had to be sick and off work. It's non-negotiable. There was like a 10-year run there where I did not do anything on that Wednesday. I was nervous the night before. Recruiting in the mid-2000s, this is pre-transfer portal now. Kids transferred every now and then, but this is pre that. This is, I would say, pre-NIL, pre-you knowing what NIL was. Let me put it that way. Pre-NIL with a head nod from the NCAA. It was so great because, I mean, the kids you were landing, that was going to be your team for the next 4 years. It wasn't like it is now where people say, oh, yeah, you landed him now. Let's see how long you keep him. Back then it was, if you land the class you want, it's the end-all, be-all. If you don't land the class you want, star rankings are overrated. You paid to get the kids. And then, closely behind that, think about the spirit and the nature of NCAA investigations. Do you understand when you saw a headline that someone was under NCAA investigation in 2006, that was like the feds knocking on your door. This was back when people feared the NCAA. Now, some of this may have changed for the better. Now, I'm not fighting that. I'm just saying recruiting and then closely behind that, sometimes a little NCAA investigation. Whew, it was serious stuff. And the star power on the head coaching rosters. You had Pete Carroll and Nick Saban and Urban Meyer and Joe Paterno and Bobby Bowden still around. Stoops was killing it at Oklahoma. Steve Spurrier, Phil Fulmer, Mac Brown won a title in 2005. Jim Tressel won one in 2002. Les Miles ends up winning one in 2007. Frank Beamer was still roaming the sidelines in Blacksburg. Yet Chris Peterson exploding onto the scene up at Boise State. Think about how deep the coaching roster was. And the thing about that is, this is not some situation where you have to look back and say, oh boy, all these young up-and-coming head coaches that ended up becoming stars. Those guys were stars then. They were stars in this era. Unbelievable time. That is the golden age of college football for me. Now, you also need to remember, I do not care for the national championship to be the end-all, be-all of college football. If you give me a dynamite regular season, I don't care about the postseason. So if you listen to that and you say, oh, man, I can't get on board with the BCS era because it was so jacked up to have computers deciding a national championship matchup, if you feel that way, you feel that way. I never cared. To me, it was never the worst thing in the world for people to be mad at the end of a college football season. The worst thing in the world would be for them not to care at the end of a college football season. I loved it. Absolutely loved it.